I never thought I'd be the type of woman to go through her husband's phone. But there I was, standing in our kitchen at 2 a.m., Robert's iPhone trembling in my hands like a loaded weapon. It had started 3 weeks earlier with small things. Robert coming home later from the office, claiming new client demands. His phone buzzing constantly during dinner, which he'd silence with an apologetic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the way he'd angle his screen away from me when texting. Something he'd never done in our 8 years of marriage. "Just work stuff, Sarah," he'd say whenever I glanced over. "You know how demanding the Peterson account has been." But tonight, he'd forgotten his phone on the counter while showering. And that's when I saw her name flash across the screen. Emma Richardson. His 26-year-old secretary, with the perfect smile and legs that seemed to go on forever. I'd met her briefly at the company Christmas party, watched how she touched Robert's arm when she laughed at his jokes, how her eyes lingered on his face just a moment too long. My finger hovered over the message notification. This was crossing a line. This was violating trust. This was necessary. I opened the thread and my world tilted sideways. Emma, working late again tomorrow. I could stay and help. Just the two of us winking face. "Robert, that's very thoughtful of you, Emma. I appreciate your dedication. Emma, I love how focused you get when you're concentrating. It's so attractive in a man." My breath caught. I scrolled up, finding weeks of messages I'd never known existed. "Emma, you looked so handsome in that blue shirt today. It really brings out your eyes." "Robert, you're very kind, Emma." "Thank you, Emma. I'm not just being kind, Robert. I mean every word. You're not like other men your age. Not like other men your age." The words hit me like a physical blow. At 52, Robert was still handsome, salt and pepper hair, kind brown eyes, a smile that had made me fall in love with him 15 years ago. But lately, I'd noticed him checking his reflection more often, sucking in his stomach when he thought I wasn't looking. I kept reading, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake him. "Emma, I stayed an extra hour, just hoping you'd notice me today. Did you see how I wore that red dress you complimented last week?" "Robert, Emma, you're a beautiful young woman. Any man would notice you." "Emma, but I only want you to notice me, Robert." Is that wrong? The conversation had happened just yesterday. While I was home making his favorite dinner, she was playing with his ego, feeding him lines about his attractiveness, his intelligence, his experience. My hands shook as I continued scrolling. "Emma, I keep thinking about when you helped me with those files last week. Your hand brushed mine, and I felt this electricity. Did you feel it too?" "Robert, Emma, I know you did. I could see it in your eyes. You're not happy at home, are you?" "I can tell. Not happy at home." I sank onto a kitchen stool, the phone nearly slipping from my numb fingers. How had she known to say exactly what a man in a midlife crisis needed to hear? "Robert, my marriage is complicated. Sarah and we've grown apart. Grown apart? When had that happened? When had I stopped being the woman he confided in and become the woman he complained about to his secretary? You deserve someone who appreciates you. Someone who sees how incredible you are. Someone young enough to keep up with you face, blowing a kiss. Robert, you make me feel young again, Emma. I haven't felt this way in years. I had to grip the counter to keep from falling. This was it, the moment I dreaded finding. Not quite an admission of physical infidelity, but something almost worse. Emotional betrayal. The giving of his heart, his confidence, his desires to another woman. The shower was still running upstairs. I kept reading, masochistically drawn to each painful revelation. Emma, I dream about you, you know. About what it would be like if you were mine completely. Robert, Emma, we can't. I'm married. Emma, but are you happy? Really happy? Or are you just going through the motions with someone who doesn't see your worth anymore? She was good, dangerously good. Every message was calculated to make him feel desired, understood, alive. She painted me as the nagging wife without ever directly insulting me. Made herself the young, passionate alternative to our comfortable, but perhaps predictable marriage. Emma, I know you think about me too. I can see it when you look at me during meetings. The way your eyes follow me when I walk across the office. Robert, you're very perceptive. Emma, and you're very sexy when you're trying to resist me. But you don't have to resist forever, Robert. Life is short. The water stopped running upstairs. Panic shot through me as I quickly scrolled to the most recent messages. Emma, tomorrow night, the office will be empty, just you and me, and all this tension we've been building. What do you say? The message was from today, and Robert hadn't responded yet. I closed the phone and set it back exactly where he'd left it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, Robert coming down for his usual late-night glass of water. I pretended to be getting myself some tea, avoiding his eyes when he entered the kitchen. Can't sleep? He asked, his voice gentle, familiar, the same voice that had whispered sweet words to another woman through these text messages. Just restless, I managed, not trusting myself to say more. He moved behind me, his hands settling on my shoulders. Once this touch would have comforted me. Now it felt like a lie. You've seemed distant lately, Sarah. Everything okay? The irony was suffocating. He was asking me about being distant while planning to spend tomorrow night alone with Emma, the woman who was systematically dismantling our marriage, one flirtatious text at a time. I'm fine, I lied, stepping away from his touch. Just tired. He studied my face for a moment, and I wondered if he could see the knowledge burning in my eyes. But he just nodded and picked up his phone, checking it quickly before pocketing it. I might be late tomorrow night, he said casually. Big presentation to prepare for. Another lie. How many had there been? How long had I been living with a stranger who wore my husband's face? Of course, I whispered. Work always comes first. As he headed back upstairs, I remained in the kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. At 34, I was still young, still attractive, but next to Emma's 26-year-old perfection, next to her calculated seduction and ego-stroking expertise, what chance did a wife of 8 years have? The woman in the window looked tired, betrayed, and utterly lost. Tomorrow night, while I waited at home, my husband would be making a choice that could destroy everything we'd built together. And the worst part, I wasn't sure he'd choose me. The next morning, I found myself staring at Robert's business calendar that hung in our home office. My hands trembled as I traced the entries with my finger, looking for any evidence of tonight's supposed big presentation. Nothing. The space for today was completely blank. My heart hammered against my ribs as the reality sank in. He'd lied so smoothly, so casually, that I wondered how many other deceptions I'd swallowed without question over the months. I needed to see Emma for myself. I needed to understand what I was truly up against. By noon, I'd fabricated an excuse to visit Robert's office. I was in the neighborhood, I'd tell him. Thought I'd surprise you with lunch. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. But after discovering his iPhone messages, deception seemed to be our new language. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt endless. My palms were sweating, and I kept rehearsing casual expressions in the mirrored walls. I had to appear normal, unsuspecting, just Sarah, the devoted wife, dropping by with homemade sandwiches. The office reception area was buzzing with afternoon energy when I stepped through the glass doors. And there she was. Emma sat behind the reception desk like she owned the place, her honey blonde hair cascading in perfect waves over one shoulder. She wore a cream-colored blouse that was just professional enough to be workplace appropriate, but the top two buttons were undone, revealing a tantalizing glimpse of her collarbone. At 26, she possessed that effortless beauty that didn't require expensive creams or careful lighting. Her skin was luminous, her smile bright and unguarded. She was everything I used to be before marriage, mortgages, and the slow erosion of daily routine had worn away my edges. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, her voice honeyed and welcoming. Up close, her eyes were a striking green, the kind that photographs beautifully and draws attention across crowded rooms. "I'm Sarah," I managed, forcing a smile. "Robert's wife. Is he available?" Something flickered across Emma's expression. Was it guilt? Surprise? But it vanished so quickly, I might have imagined it. "Oh, Mrs. Morrison," she said, standing gracefully. "How lovely to finally meet you. Robert talks about you all the time." The lie was delivered with such practiced sweetness that I almost believed it. Almost. "I brought him lunch," I said, holding up the paper bag like evidence of my good intentions. "He's in his office. Let me walk you back." As we moved through the corridors, I watched Emma's movements. She glided rather than walked, her hips swaying in a way that was both natural and calculated. Other male employees glanced up as we passed, their eyes following her with obvious appreciation. But it was when we reached Robert's office that I truly understood the depth of my competition. Emma knocked softly before opening the door. "Robert, your wife is here with lunch." Robert looked up from his computer, and I saw it immediately. The way his eyes lingered on Emma for just a beat too long before shifting to me. The slight flush that crept up his neck, the smile that seemed more forced when it landed on my face. "Sarah, what a surprise," he said, standing quickly and moving around his desk. But I noticed how Emma lingered in the doorway, her hand resting on the frame in a way that drew attention to her slender fingers and the delicate silver bracelet adorning her wrist. "I'll let you two have your lunch," Emma said, but she made no immediate move to leave. Instead, she turned to Robert with a smile that seemed to hold secret knowledge. "Don't forget about tonight's preparation session." And the words hung in the air like smoke. Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Right," he said. "Thanks for the reminder, Emma." She gave a little wave to both of us, but somehow it felt directed entirely at him, and finally disappeared down the hallway. The silence that followed was deafening. "Preparation session?" I asked, unpacking the sandwiches with hands that weren't quite steady. "For the presentation tomorrow," Robert said quickly. Too quickly. "Emma's helping me organize the materials." Another lie, delivered with the same casual ease as this morning's deception about being late. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about work and weekend plans, but I found myself studying Robert's face, searching for signs of the man I'd married 8 years ago. When had the laugh lines around his eyes started looking strained? When had his smiles become performances? Halfway through lunch, Emma appeared in the doorway again. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though she didn't look sorry at all. "Robert, I need you to look at something when you have a moment." She stepped into the office, moving to stand beside his desk. As she leaned over to point at something on his computer screen, her blouse gaped slightly, and I watched Robert's eyes dart downward before he caught himself. Emma's perfume, something light and floral, probably expensive, filled the small space. It was the kind of scent that lingered on clothing, the kind a man might notice hours later and wonder where it came from. "This section here," Emma was saying, her voice soft and conspiratorial. "I think it needs more impact." Her hand brushed against Robert's shoulder as she straightened, and I saw him stiffen slightly, not with discomfort, but with awareness, the kind of electric tension that happens when attraction crackles between two people who are trying to maintain professional boundaries. "I'll look at it later," Robert said, his voice rougher than usual. Emma smiled, that same knowing smile from before, and headed for the door. But she paused at the threshold, looking back over her shoulder. "See you tonight, then. I'll stay as late as necessary to get everything perfect." And after she left, the office felt somehow smaller, as if her presence had expanded to fill every corner, and her absence left a vacuum. I looked at my husband, this man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, whose coffee preferences I knew by heart, whose dreams I'd listened to in the dark hours before dawn, and realized I was looking at a stranger. He was attracted to her. The signs were unmistakable. The way he'd held his breath when she leaned close, the slight tremor in his voice when he spoke to her, the guilty flush that colored his cheeks when he realized I was watching. But more than that, he was enjoying it. For the first time in months, maybe years, I'd seen him truly animated, energized by female attention that was freely given rather than expected. As I packed up the remains of our lunch, a terrible understanding settled over me. Emma wasn't just beautiful and young. She was offering Robert something I'd stopped providing long ago. She was making him feel desired, important, worth pursuing. When was the last time I'd looked at him with genuine admiration? When had I stopped noticing his accomplishments, stopped making him feel like the most interesting man in any room? Marriage, I realized with crushing clarity, had made me complacent. I'd assumed his love was permanent, unshakable, mine by right rather than by choice. Emma was offering him choice. She was reminding him that he was still attractive, still worth seducing, still capable of inspiring passion in a woman who didn't take him for granted. If this story is giving you butterflies, like and subscribe. Walking to my car afterward, I caught my reflection in the building's glass facade. At 34, I wasn't old, but standing in that office next to Emma's radiant youth, I'd felt ancient, worn like a faded photograph next to a brilliant original. Tonight, while I sat home pretending to believe his lies about late work, my husband would be alone with a woman who made him remember what it felt like to be pursued rather than merely tolerated. And I wasn't sure our 8-year marriage could survive the comparison. The next 3 weeks passed in a haze of forced normalcy. Robert came home at his usual times, kissed my cheek with practiced affection, and asked about my day with what seemed like genuine interest. But I knew what to look for now, the subtle signs that his heart was elsewhere. The way he checked his phone constantly, even during dinner. The new cologne that appeared in our bathroom, expensive and unfamiliar. The sudden interest in working out. His body becoming leaner and more defined, as if preparing for someone's admiration. I started doing his laundry differently, examining each shirt before putting it in the hamper. That's when I found the first lipstick stain, a soft pink smudge on his collar that definitely wasn't my shade. My hands trembled as I held the evidence, the cotton fabric feeling like it might burn my fingers. When I confronted him that evening, Robert's eyes went wide with what looked like genuine confusion. "Sarah, I have no idea how that got there. Maybe someone at the office hugged me goodbye. You know how some of the clients can be." His explanation was so reasonable, delivered with such earnest bewilderment, that I almost believed him. Almost. But 2 days later, while organizing his wallet to look for our insurance cards, I found hotel receipts. 3 of them, all from the Marriott downtown, all charged to his personal credit card. The dates made my stomach drop. Each one corresponded to a night he'd claimed to be working late on the Henderson project. My hands shook as I photographed the receipts with my phone. The evidence was damning, but I needed more. I needed to know for certain before I destroyed our marriage with accusations. That night, while Robert showered, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through his laptop. His email password was still our wedding anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I scrolled through his inbox, heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the running water upstairs. Most of it was work correspondence, routine and boring. Then I found the private folder. Emma's name appeared dozens of times, messages sent and received at all hours. But it wasn't just the frequency that made my breath catch. It was the content. Missing the taste of your lips already. Read one from her. Sent at 11:47 p.m. Can't concentrate on anything but how you felt against me tonight, Robert had replied. I scrolled deeper, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. There were photos, not explicit, but intimate enough. Emma in a hotel bathrobe, her hair tousled and lips swollen. Robert's hands visible in one shot, reaching to touch her face. The shower upstairs stopped running. I quickly closed the laptop and returned to the kitchen, my whole body trembling with rage and heartbreak when Robert came downstairs in his pajamas, hair still damp. He looked so much like the man I'd married that it physically hurt. You're up late, he said, kissing the top of my head as he reached for a glass of water. Couldn't sleep, I managed. He studied my face with what seemed like genuine concern. Everything okay? The caring in his voice, the familiar warmth of his body next to mine. It was all real, I realized. That was the most devastating part. Robert still loved me, still cared about my well-being, even while he was betraying everything we'd built together. Just thinking about work stuff, I lied. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I could smell that new cologne mixed with his familiar scent. The combination made me nauseous. You work too hard, he murmured into my hair. Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway soon. Just the two of us. The suggestion would have thrilled me a month ago. Now it felt like salt in an open wound. How could he plan romantic trips with me while sneaking off to hotels with Emma over the following days? I watched him with new eyes. The guilt was there if you knew how to look for it. In the expensive gifts that started appearing without occasion, the sudden interest in taking me out to dinner, the way he made love to me with an intensity that felt almost desperate. It was during one of these moments, as he kissed my neck with unusual fervor, that I realized the horrible truth. Robert's passion for me had been rekindled by his affair with Emma. He was using the excitement she generated to fuel his performance at home, bringing the energy of forbidden desire back to our marriage bed. I felt sick. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Robert called to say he'd be working late again. Another emergency with the Henderson project. This time, instead of accepting it with resigned understanding, I decided to drive to his office. The building's parking garage was nearly empty at 8 p.m., but Robert's BMW was there, along with a red Audi I recognized as Emma's. My heart hammered as I took the elevator to the 15th floor. The office was dark, except for one corner, Robert's private office, where warm light spilled through the glass walls. I stayed hidden behind a pillar, watching. They weren't working. Robert and Emma were on the leather couch in his office, a bottle of wine open on the coffee table. She was curled against his side, still in her work clothes, but with her shoes off, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her before. Robert was stroking her hair with a tenderness that made my chest ache. This wasn't just physical attraction. There was genuine affection in every gesture. The way he looked at her, listened to her speak, laughed at whatever she was saying. It was how he used to look at me during our early dating years. I watched as she lifted her face to his, and their lips met in a kiss that was both passionate and achingly tender. His hands cupped her face like she was made of precious crystal, and when they broke apart, they simply looked at each other with such obvious adoration that I had to grip the pillar to keep from collapsing. This wasn't a meaningless fling. My husband was falling in love with another woman. I left before I could see more, driving home through tears that made the city lights blur into streaks of color. By the time Robert came home at midnight, claiming exhaustion from the difficult client meeting, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. He slipped in beside me, and I could smell wine on his breath, mixed with Emma's perfume. When he whispered, "I love you," into the darkness, I knew he meant it. But I also knew it wasn't enough anymore. Love, I was learning, could coexist with betrayal. The human heart was capable of holding both devotion and deception, loyalty and longing for someone else. As Robert's breathing deepened into sleep, I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what came next. My marriage was ending. That much was clear. The only question was whether it would die slowly from neglect or quickly from the truth I now carried like a weight in my chest. Either way, the woman who had trusted blindly, who had taken love for granted, was gone forever. In her place was someone harder, wiser, and infinitely more alone. The next morning, Robert was gone before I woke up. Another early meeting that I no longer believed. I found a note on the kitchen counter next to a coffee cup, still warm to the touch. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you, love you." The words felt hollow now, like echoes in an empty house. I spent the day playing detective in my own life, something I never thought I'd become. Robert's home office had always been off limits during his work hours, but with him gone, I searched through his desk drawers with trembling hands. Hidden beneath quarterly reports, I found restaurant receipts from places we'd never been together. Intimate bistros downtown, the kind with candlelit tables and wine lists that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. One receipt from Chez Laurent made my stomach drop. 2 dinners, a bottle of champagne, and the date was our wedding anniversary. The night he'd claimed to be stuck in back-to-back client calls until 11 p.m. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Coffee later. You sounded off yesterday." I couldn't face Rachel's concerned questions. Not yet. Instead, I found myself doing something that felt both necessary and pathetic, stalking Emma's Instagram account. Her profile was public, filled with carefully curated photos of her perfect life. Yoga poses at sunrise, artisanal coffee cups, designer handbags I recognized from Robert's recent business expense charges. but it was the recent posts that made my blood run cold. A photo of 2 wine glasses at sunset with the caption, "Some secrets are worth keeping." Another showing her reflection in a hotel mirror, wearing a silk robe I'd never seen, tagged with a cryptic "best night ever" and a heart emoji. The comments from her friends were telling. "Who's the mystery man? You're glowing lately. When do we get to meet him?" Emma's responses were coy but revealing. "Soon, hopefully. And he's worth the wait. And most damning of all, some things are complicated, but love finds a way. And love finds a way." She was in love with my husband, posting about it for the world to see while I sat in my kitchen eating day-old cereal and trying to hold my marriage together. That evening, Robert came home with another piece, offering expensive chocolates from the gourmet shop downtown. The same shop where, according to his credit card statement I'd memorized, he'd made 3 purchases in the past month, gifts I'd never received. "You're spoiling me," I said, accepting his kiss on the cheek. His cologne was different again, something woody and expensive that Emma had probably chosen. "You deserve to be spoiled," he replied, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. "How was your day? Beautiful, beautiful." The endearment felt strange coming from his lips, like he was reading from a script he'd forgotten how to perform naturally. "Quiet," I lied, "just caught up on some reading." "How was your day? Busy? This Richardson project is consuming everything." He loosened his tie, the same nervous gesture I'd noticed increasing lately. "I might need to work this weekend too." Another weekend. Another lie. I nodded sympathetically while calculating how many work weekends he'd claimed in the past 2 months. 7 weekends where he'd left me alone while he built a life with someone else. Dinner was tense, filled with the kind of polite conversation strangers make at business lunches. Robert checked his phone constantly, his face lighting up with each notification in a way it hadn't for me in months. When it buzzed during our main course, he actually smiled before catching himself. "Work?" I asked innocently. "Always," he said, but I caught him typing back quickly under the table. His thumbs moved with the practiced ease of someone writing to their lover, not their boss. Later, as we watched television in separate chairs, instead of cuddled on the couch like we used to, Robert's phone lit up with a FaceTime call. The name on the screen read E. Thompson, Emma's formal contact listing, as if the initial could hide what I already knew. "I should take this," he said, already standing. "Richardson client emergency." But as he walked to his office, I heard him answer with a voice I remembered from our early dating days. Warm, intimate, alive. "Hey you, I've been thinking about you all day." The office door closed, but our house had thin walls. For the next hour, I heard fragments of conversation that cut through me like glass. Laughter I hadn't heard from him in years. The low, murmured tones of phone intimacy. At one point, clear as day, "I wish I could be there with you right now, sweetheart." Sweetheart. He used to call me that. When he finally emerged, his face was flushed and his hair slightly messed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Sorry about that," he said, crisis averted. Good, I replied, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. I'm heading to bed. I'll be up soon, he promised. But we both knew it was another lie. He'd stay downstairs, probably texting Emma until the early morning hours, living a double life that was becoming more real than our marriage. Lying in our bed that night, I listened to his phone buzzing constantly from downstairs. Each notification was like a tiny betrayal, a reminder that someone else held his attention, his passion, his heart. The worst part wasn't the lies, or even the betrayal itself. It was watching the man I'd loved for 8 years become a stranger who wore Robert's face, but lived for someone else's touch. He was putting more effort into deceiving me than he'd put into loving me in months. Emma was getting bolder too. I'd seen her posts becoming more frequent, more obvious. She was pushing for something, recognition, commitment, a future that didn't include me. The pressure was showing in Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. Yesterday, he'd called me M while asking about dinner plans, then covered it with a coughing fit when he realized his mistake. This morning, he'd forgotten that today was my mother's birthday, something he'd never missed in all our years together. But his calendar was full of Em-related appointments disguised as business meetings, client dinners that were really romantic dates, work trips that were weekend getaways. I was watching my marriage crumble in real time, held together only by Robert's guilt and my own paralysis. Part of me wanted to confront him, to force the truth into the open, and this charade. But another part of me, the part that still hoped this was all a nightmare I'd wake up from, kept gathering evidence like it might somehow change the inevitable outcome. The truth was, I was stalling, because once I spoke the words aloud, once I acknowledged what we both knew, there would be no going back. Our marriage would officially be over, and I wasn't ready to let go of the life we'd built, even if it was built on lies. But Emma wasn't going to wait forever, and Robert's guilt was making him reckless. Soon, one of them would force the issue, and I'd have to decide whether to fight for a marriage that might already be lost or walk away with whatever dignity I had left. This story gets even crazier. Hit like if you want to hear more. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry in our bedroom. Rachel's voice was strained, careful in that way that meant she was choosing her words deliberately. "Sarah, we need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee?" Something in her tone made my stomach drop. Rachel had been my best friend since college. She knew about the growing distance in my marriage, but I hadn't told her about the affair. Not yet. I wasn't ready to make it real by speaking it aloud to someone else. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down one of Robert's dress shirts. Not over the phone. Starbucks on 5th Street in an hour. The drive there felt endless. Rachel was already waiting when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was an anchor. Her expression told me everything before she even opened her mouth. "I saw Robert last night," she said without preamble, "at Chez Laurent." My heart stopped. Chez Laurent was the restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement 7 years ago. The restaurant where Robert had taken Emma on our anniversary. He wasn't alone, Rachel continued, her voice gentle but firm. Sarah, I'm so sorry. There was a young woman with him, blonde, beautiful. They were intimate, holding hands across the table, kissing like they were completely in love. And the words hit me like physical blows. Even though I'd known, even though I'd seen the evidence, hearing it from someone else made it devastatingly real. I debated whether to tell you, Rachel admitted. I've been awake all night thinking about it. But you're my best friend, and you deserve to know. I nodded, unable to speak. Part of me wanted to pretend this conversation wasn't happening, but another part felt relief that the burden of this secret was no longer mine alone. How long have you known? Rachel asked gently. Weeks, I whispered. I found text messages, then emails, hotel receipts. I've been watching my marriage fall apart piece by piece. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? If that was the question I'd been avoiding. What was I going to do? I drove home in a daze, Rachel's words echoing in my mind. Robert's BMW was already in the driveway. He was home early, which was unusual lately. I parked next to his car and noticed something glinting on the passenger seat. My hands shook as I peered through the window. A small gold earring on the leather upholstery. Delicate, expensive looking, definitely not mine. I'd seen Emma wearing earrings just like it during my visit to Robert's office. The sight of it sitting there so casually, so carelessly, made my chest tighten with rage. I let myself into the house quietly. Robert was in his study, door closed, voice low on what sounded like a phone call. I crept closer, my heart pounding. Can't keep doing this, Em. Sarah's getting suspicious. His voice was strained, worried. No, I can't just leave. It's complicated. There was a pause. Then Robert's voice again, softer now. I love you too, but you have to be patient. These things take time. I backed away from the door, my hands trembling, the casual intimacy in his voice. The way he said, I love you to another woman. It was more devastating than all the physical evidence combined. That evening, as we sat at dinner pretending everything was normal, the house phone rang. I answered, but the line went dead. It happened again 20 minutes later, then once more before we went to bed. Probably a telemarketer, Robert said, but I caught the flash of panic in his eyes. The calls continued over the next few days. Always when Robert was home, always hanging up when I answered. The third time it happened, I heard a soft female voice say, "Oh," before the line went dead. Emma's voice. Robert was becoming increasingly agitated. He'd started carrying 2 phones, his regular iPhone and a smaller device he thought I hadn't noticed. He'd excuse himself to take calls, disappearing into his study or stepping outside. When I asked about work, his answers were vague, distracted. The breaking point came on Friday afternoon. Robert had forgotten his briefcase when he left for work, unusual for someone so meticulous. It sat on the kitchen counter like a beacon, and after an hour of staring at it, my curiosity won. My hands shook as I opened the leather case. Inside, beneath his usual files and contracts, I found something that made my blood run cold. Apartment listings. 3 different properties, all downtown condos, all expensive. Notes were scribbled in Robert's handwriting. Good natural light. Emma would love the kitchen, close to both our offices. But they weren't just having an affair. They were planning a life together. One of the listings had a business card clipped to it from a real estate agent named Patricia Wells. There was a scheduled appointment for tomorrow at 2 p.m. to view a penthouse apartment, the same time Robert had told me he had a client meeting. I sank into a kitchen chair, the listings scattered before me like pieces of my shattered future. This wasn't a fling or a midlife crisis. Robert was preparing to leave me, to start over with Emma in some beautiful downtown apartment where they could play house without the inconvenience of a wife who'd become invisible. The phone rang again, startling me from my thoughts. This time when I answered, Emma didn't hang up immediately. "Is Robert there?" Her voice was confident, possessive, like she had every right to call my house and ask for my husband. "No," I managed. "When will he be back?" The audacity of it took my breath away. "Who is this?" There was a pause. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my trembling hands, at the apartment listings spread across my kitchen table, at the life I'd built that was crumbling around me. Emma wasn't hiding anymore. She was claiming her territory, marking what she saw as hers. That night, Robert came home with flowers, gilt flowers I now recognized. He kissed my forehead with lips that had kissed another woman hours before. Told me he loved me with the same voice that had whispered endearments to Emma. "How was your day?" he asked, setting the flowers on the counter directly over where I'd found his secret apartment listings. "Fine," I lied, just like he'd been lying to me for months. As we went through the motions of our evening routine, dinner, television, small talk that meant nothing, I realized I was living with a stranger. The man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future, had already moved on. He was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. The paranoia was consuming me. Every glance at his phone, every late meeting, every unexplained absence felt like another piece of evidence in a case I was building against my own marriage. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, suspicious, desperate, clinging to a relationship that existed now only in my imagination. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet, even knowing what I knew. Even with the apartment listings burning a hole in my memory, I couldn't bring myself to speak the words that would end everything. Because once I did, once I forced Robert to choose, I knew exactly who he'd pick, and I wasn't strong enough to hear him say Emma's name instead of mine. The walls were closing in, and time was running out. Emma was getting impatient. Robert was getting careless, and I was getting desperate. Something had to give. This story is about to reach its most shocking moment. Hit like if you're ready for what happens next. The breaking point came 3 days later. Robert was in the shower when his second phone buzzed on the nightstand, the phone he thought I didn't know about. Without thinking, I grabbed it. The message preview made my blood freeze. "Baby, I can't wait anymore. Tell her tonight, or I will." My hands were shaking as I scrolled through weeks of messages I'd never seen. Photos of Emma in lingerie. Robert's responses about leaving me soon. Plans for their weekend getaway to Napa. And then the message that shattered what was left of my heart. "You make me feel alive again. M." Sarah and I were just going through the motions now. I heard the shower turn off. My heart hammered against my ribs as I placed the phone exactly where I'd found it and walked downstairs to the living room. But this time, I wasn't running. This time, I was done hiding when Robert came down 20 minutes later, freshly shaved and wearing the cologne Emma had given him. I was sitting on the couch with everything spread out on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. The hotel receipts, the restaurant bills from our anniversary, the credit card statements showing purchases at Victoria's Secret, Emma's gold earring, and printed screenshots of every text message, every email, every photo. "Sarah," his voice cracked when he saw the display. "What is all this?" I looked up at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. "You tell me, Robert, because I'm obviously too stupid to figure it out on my own." He sank into the armchair across from me, his face pale. "Those aren't. I can explain." "Which part?" I held up Emma's earring. "Finding this in your BMW. Or maybe this." I grabbed the Shea Laurent receipt. "Our 8th wedding anniversary, Robert. While I was home making your favorite dinner, you were feeding Emma champagne and telling her how beautiful she looked." His hands covered his face. "Sarah, please. Or maybe you want to explain these." I threw the printed photos across the coffee table. Pictures of Emma in hotel rooms, Robert's reflection visible in mirrors, timestamps showing they'd been taken during his business trips. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When Robert finally looked up, his eyes were red but defiant. "You went through my private things." The audacity of it hit me like a slap. "Your private things, Robert, we're married. There shouldn't be private things when it comes to other women. You don't understand. Then make me understand." I shot to my feet, 8 years of suppressed anger exploding out of me. "Make me understand how you could lie to my face every single day. Make me understand how you could sleep next to me after being with her." Robert stood too, his own anger finally surfacing. "You want to know? Fine. When's the last time you looked at me the way she does? When's the last time you made me feel like a man instead of just a paycheck and a lawn mower?" His words hit like physical blows. "So this is my fault." "That's not what I'm saying. That's exactly what you're saying." Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You're 40 years old, Robert, not 25. Did you think a 26-year-old secretary wanted you for your sparkling personality? She's not like that. She's exactly like that. She sees a successful married man having a midlife crisis. And she knows exactly which buttons to push. I grabbed one of the text screenshots. You're so much more mature than guys my age. You understand me like no one else. God, Robert, she's reading from a playbook. You don't know her. I know she's been calling our house. I know she posts cryptic messages on social media, hinting about her special someone. I know she's territorial enough to leave her earring in your car, like a dog marking territory. But Robert's phone, his real phone, started ringing on the kitchen counter. We both looked toward it, and I saw Emma's name flash across the screen. Answer it, I said quietly. Let's get this over with. Sarah, no. Answer it. With trembling hands, Robert picked up the phone. Emma, this isn't a... Even from across the room, I could hear her voice, high and agitated. Did you tell her? Robert, you promised. Emma, please. I'm coming over. We need to talk about this together. The line went dead. Robert stared at the phone like it was a snake. She's coming here. My voice was deadly calm. To my house. Sarah, I'll call her back. Don't you dare. I walked back to the couch and sat down. I want to meet the woman who's been sharing my husband. I want to look her in the eye. 20 minutes later, Emma's red Audi pulled into our driveway. Through the window, I watched her check her makeup in the rearview mirror before stepping out. She wore a white sundress that showed off her tan, her blonde hair perfectly styled even at 9 o'clock at night. She knocked like she owned the place. Robert looked at me desperately. Sarah, please. I walked to the door and opened it myself. Emma's confident smile faltered when she saw me. Up close, she was even prettier than in the photos, all dewy skin and bright eyes, but there was something calculating in her expression that made my skin crawl. You must be Sarah, she said, extending a manicured hand. I'm Emma. I didn't take her hand. I know exactly who you are. She stepped past me into my living room like she'd been invited. Her eyes swept over the evidence still scattered on the coffee table, and her smile returned. I see you've been having quite the conversation. Robert appeared behind me. Emma, you shouldn't have come. Of course I should have come. She turned to me with fake sympathy. Sarah, I know this is hard, but Robert and I were in love. Real love. The kind that changes everything. I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. Love. Honey, you're a child playing grown-up games with a man having a midlife crisis. Her eyes flashed. I'm 26, not 16, and Robert chose me. He's choosing his penis, not you. There's a difference. Sarah, Robert started. Actually, there's something else you should know. Emma's hand moved to her flat stomach. We're having a baby. The world tilted. Robert's face went white. What? He whispered. Emma smiled triumphantly. I found out yesterday. So you see, Sarah, this isn't just some affair anymore. We're going to be a family. I watched Robert's expression crumble as the trap closed around him, but something in Emma's eyes, a flicker of uncertainty when she looked at him, told me she was lying. Congratulations, I said evenly. When's the due date? It's early still. How early? because Robert had a vasectomy 3 years ago, and the silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face flushed red, then drained of all color. Robert stared at her in horror. Emma, I thought. She was stammering now, the confident mask slipping. Maybe it failed. Get out of my house. My voice was steel. Get out of my house and stay away from my husband. Robert, Emma reached for him desperately. But he stepped back, looking at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Just go, Emma. Please. Between us one more time, then fled to her car with tears streaming down her face. When the door closed behind her, Robert and I were left alone with the wreckage of our marriage spread out between us. Sarah, don't. I held up my hand. Just don't, because even though Emma was gone, even though her lies had been exposed, nothing had really changed. The betrayal was still there. The broken trust, the months of deception, and I still didn't know if we could survive it. Tell me your wildest relationship story in the comments, because sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. The hardest part wasn't even the affair. It was what came next. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Robert stood there, still staring at the door where Emma had fled, his face a mixture of shock and something else I couldn't quite read. Relief, regret. Sarah, I need you to know. What, Robert? What do I need to know? The words came out sharper than I intended. That you've been lying to me for months. That you planned to leave me for a woman who just tried to trap you with a fake pregnancy. He ran his hands through his hair. The same gesture I'd watched him make 1,000 times when he was stressed about work. Except this time, I was the problem he needed to solve. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I crossed my arms, suddenly aware of how frumpy I looked in my old jeans and oversized sweater compared to Emma's designer dresses. Were you planning to just disappear one day? Leave me a note. I was going to tell you. I needed time to figure things out. Time, I laughed bitterly. You had plenty of time, Robert. Time to book hotel rooms. Time to look at apartments. Time to buy her expensive jewelry. While I was making your lunch every morning, like some pathetic housewife. That hit home. His shoulders sagged. Sarah, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you fell out of love with me, that I'm not exciting enough anymore. My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay strong. That a 26-year-old with perfect skin and a designer wardrobe made you feel young again. It's not about that. Then what is it about? I demanded. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you threw away 15 years of marriage for someone who just lied to your face about carrying your baby. Robert sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I don't know what happened to us, Sarah. When did we stop talking? When did we become strangers living in the same house? We stopped talking when you started texting her instead of me. The hurt was raw in my voice now. We became strangers when you started sharing your thoughts and feelings with Emma instead of your wife." He looked up at me then, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I never meant for this to happen, but it did happen. And now what? Emma's gone. But everything she exposed about our marriage is still true, isn't it?" The question hung in the air between us. Robert didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "I think," he said slowly, "I think I need some space to figure out what I want." My heart stopped. Space, just temporarily. Maybe I could stay at my brother's place for a while. Give us both time to think. Time to think, or time to chase after Emma. Sarah, she lied to me. About the pregnancy, probably about other things too. I can see that now, but you still have feelings for her. He didn't deny it. That silence cut deeper than any confession could have. "I'll pack a bag," he said quietly. I watched him walk up the stairs to our bedroom. His footsteps on the same wooden steps we'd climbed together thousands of times. 20 minutes later, he came back down with his leather overnight bag and his laptop case. "I'll call you in a few days," he said at the door. "Will you?" I asked. "Or will you be too busy trying to win back your secretary?" He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "This isn't about Emma anymore, isn't it?" But he was already walking to his car, throwing his bags in the back seat. I watched from the window as he pulled out of our driveway, the same driveway where we'd taught our nephew to ride a bike, where we'd kissed under the mistletoe last Christmas. The house felt enormous and empty after he left. I wandered through the rooms we'd decorated together, touching the furniture we'd picked out, looking at the photos that suddenly seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. I called Rachel. "He left," I said when she answered. "Oh, honey, I'm coming over. You don't have to. I'm already in my car." 20 minutes later, Rachel was at my door with a bottle of wine and a box of tissues. We sat on my couch, the same couch where Robert and I used to watch movies on Friday nights, and I told her everything. "The worst part is, I keep thinking about what I did wrong," I admitted. "Maybe if I'd tried harder to look good for him. Maybe if I'd been more adventurous, more spontaneous." "Stop it," Rachel said firmly. "This is not your fault. Robert made a choice, multiple choices, every day for months. He chose to lie to you and sneak around with Emma. But what if he's right? What if we did become strangers? Then you work on it together. You don't run off with your secretary." I poured another glass of wine, my third or fourth. "I feel so stupid, Rachel. All those nights I was making dinner while he was texting her. All those mornings I kissed him goodbye while he was planning to leave me. You trusted your husband. That's not stupid. That's what wives do. I should have seen the signs. The new clothes, the gym membership, the way he started looking at me like I was invisible." Rachel moved closer on the couch. "Honey, you can't blame yourself for not seeing what someone was actively hiding from you, but I did blame myself." That night, after Rachel left, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror in my pajamas and saw what Robert saw, a 34-year-old woman who'd stopped trying. Gray roots showing through my brown hair, tired eyes, the soft curves that had settled around my hips and waist. Emma was 26, blonde, and had never carried a child or spent sleepless nights worrying about mortgage payments and elderly parents. I crawled into our bed, though it felt like just mine now, and stared at the ceiling. Robert's pillow still smelled like his cologne. I grabbed it and buried my face in it, finally letting myself cry. The next morning, my phone rang. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Robert calling to say he'd made a mistake, that he was coming home. It was my sister Jennifer. "I heard," she said without preamble. "Are you okay? How did you?" "Rachel called me. I'm driving up this weekend." "Jen, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're not going through this alone." After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder. Anger, maybe, or determination. I looked around the house that was now just mine and made a decision. If Robert wanted space to figure out what he wanted, then I'd use that time too. To figure out who I was without him, to remember the woman I'd been before I became half of Robert and Sarah. It was time to rebuild my life from the ground up. 6 months passed like a strange dream. At first, the days crawled by in a haze of tissues and takeout containers, but somewhere around month 3, something clicked. Maybe it was Jennifer's tough love during her weekend visits, or maybe it was Rachel dragging me to that pottery class where I met other women rebuilding their lives. I started small, got my hair professionally colored, honey blonde highlights that made my eyes pop, joined a yoga studio downtown, cleaned out Robert's closet, and donated his abandoned clothes to charity, keeping only what he'd specifically asked for. The biggest change came when I finally acted on an idea I'd been nurturing for years. I'd always been good with organization, had helped friends plan events and manage their small businesses with my divorce lawyer's encouragement. Yes, I'd filed papers. I started my own consulting company, Fresh Start Solutions. My first client was Mrs. Henderson next door, who needed help organizing her late husband's estate. Word spread through our neighborhood, then to the yoga studio, then to Rachel's book club. Within 4 months, I had 12 regular clients and a waiting list. I was reviewing quarterly projections at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd discovered Robert's text messages, when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. "Hello, Sarah." Robert's voice hit me like a physical blow. "Please don't hang up." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What do you want, Robert?" Can we meet? I need to talk to you. We can talk through our lawyers." "Sarah, please, just coffee." 1 hour, something in his voice, a brokenness I'd never heard before, made me pause. Why now? It's been 6 months, a long silence. Because I've been because Emma, she's with someone else now. A surgeon from Chicago. She moved there last month. Of course she had. I almost laughed at the predictability of it all. "So now that your girlfriend has upgraded, you want your backup plan. It's not, isn't it?" "Sarah, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I threw away 20 years of marriage for. For what? For someone who never really loved me. I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. The woman looking back at me was stronger than the one who discovered those first text messages. Her shoulders were straighter, her jaw more defined. She wore a coral blouse that complemented her new highlights and made her skin glow. "One coffee," I said finally. "Brewster's Cafe, tomorrow at 2. The next afternoon, I arrived early and chose a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. I ordered a lavender latte, something I'd discovered during my months of self-exploration, and waited. Robert walked in looking like he'd aged 5 years in 6 months. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. When he spotted me, his face crumpled with something that looked like relief mixed with regret. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the coffee menu. "You look," he paused, studying my face. "You look beautiful, Sarah. Different, but beautiful." "Thank you." I kept my voice neutral, professional. The same tone I used with difficult clients. "I heard about your business. Rachel mentioned it when I called looking for you." Of course he'd called Rachel. "It's going well. I'm proud of you." His voice cracked slightly. "I always knew you had it in you to build something of your own." "Did you?" "Because I remember you discouraging me from taking that business course 3 years ago. Said it would interfere with your travel schedule." He flinched. "I was wrong about a lot of things." The barista called out an order, and the normal sounds of cafe life continued around us while we sat in our bubble of tension and history. "Emma left you," I said. It wasn't a question. "She did." He stared into his untouched black coffee. "Met Dr. Richardson at some medical conference. Apparently, he has a penthouse in Chicago and a vacation home in Aspen, more impressive than your downtown condo plans." Robert's jaw tightened. "You know about that." "I know about everything, Robert. The apartment hunting, the secret credit cards, the weekend trips you disguised as business meetings. I hired a private investigator." His head snapped up. "You what? Did you think I'd just sit around waiting for you to decide between us? I needed to know the full extent of your lies, so my lawyer could protect my interests." For the first time since he'd arrived, Robert looked truly stunned. The old Sarah would have felt guilty for shocking him. This Sarah felt nothing but satisfaction. "I deserve that," he said quietly. "I deserve all of it. Sarah, I came here to apologize. To beg, actually." "For what exactly?" "For destroying our marriage. For choosing excitement over love. For making you feel like you weren't enough when you were everything I should have wanted." I sipped my lavender latte and watched his face. 6 months ago, these words would have sent me running back into his arms. Now they felt like too little, too late. "I want to come home," he continued. "I want to fix this. I want us to go to counseling. Take a vacation. Remember why we fell in love in the first place." "Do you know why I agreed to meet you today?" I asked. He shook his head. closure. I needed to see if there was anything left worth saving, and hope flickered in his tired eyes. I studied this man I'd loved for 20 years. The same strong jaw that used to make my heart race. The same green eyes that had looked at me with such devotion on our wedding day. But something fundamental had shifted. The trust was gone. The respect was gone. And maybe most importantly, the version of myself that had needed his validation was gone too. I don't know, I said honestly. I still love you, Robert. Part of me probably always will. But love isn't enough anymore. What do you need from me? I'll do anything. I need time. Real time. Not just until the next Emma comes along. There won't be another Emma. And how can I believe that when you spent a year lying to my face? Robert reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. Because losing you taught me what I really had. Emma was. She was like a drug, exciting and dangerous and ultimately destructive. But you, Sarah, you were my home, my peace, my partner. I pulled my hand away. Were, past tense, could be again, if you'll let me try. I finished my latte and gathered my purse. I need to think about it. And if I decide to try, it won't be the same marriage we had before. I'm not the same woman. I can see that. And honestly, I think I like this version of you even more. I stood up, and he scrambled to his feet too. Sarah, wait. Can I call you next week? You can call. I can't promise I'll answer. As I walked to my car, I felt the weight of decision pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to run back to the safety of what we'd had. But another part, the part that had built a business and learned to sleep alone and discovered she actually preferred lavender lattes to plain coffee, whispered that maybe some bridges were meant to stay burned. Tell me your wildest relationship story in the comments, because sometimes the most unexpected plot twists teach us who we really are. 2 weeks passed before I answered his call. Sarah. Robert's voice was cautious, hopeful. I've been thinking about what you said, about trying again. Silence stretched between us, filled with years of shared history and months of separation. And I want to try counseling, but I have conditions. Anything, complete transparency. Your phone, your email, your schedule, everything open. And we take it slow. I mean glacially slow, Robert. We're starting from scratch. I understand. Thank you for giving us this chance. Dr. Martinez's office became our weekly refuge. The burgundy leather chairs faced each other like opposing forces, with her neutral beige couch serving as Switzerland between us. Week after week, we excavated the ruins of our marriage, examining each broken piece. Sarah, you mentioned feeling invisible in the relationship, Dr. Martinez said during our 4th session. Robert, how do you respond to that? Robert's hands were clasped tightly in his lap. I took her for granted. I see that now. Sarah was always there, reliable. I stopped seeing how extraordinary that was, and the affair provided what exactly? Novelty, excitement, the thrill of being wanted by someone new. He looked at me directly, but it was hollow, like eating candy when you need real food. I found myself softening despite my defenses. The Robert sitting across from me wasn't the confident man who'd left me for Emma. This version was humbled, broken in places, but somehow more real. By our 8th session, we were making progress. Robert had moved back into the guest room. We were having dinner together twice a week. Tentative conversations about the future. "I've been thinking about selling the downtown office," he said over pasta one evening. "Working from home more, spending time on what matters." What brought this on? You did, this whole experience. I realized I was chasing the wrong things. That night, for the first time in months, he kissed my forehead before going to his room. It was tender, careful, like handling something precious that might break. 3 days later, everything changed. I found Robert doubled over in the kitchen, his face gray with pain. "It's just indigestion," he gasped, but his hands were shaking. "We're going to the hospital now." The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Robert's hand found mine as we waited, and I didn't pull away. Dr. Chen appeared hours later with test results and an expression that made my stomach drop. "Mr. Thompson, we need to run more tests, but the initial blood work shows elevated levels that concern us. We're looking at possible pancreatic involvement." Pancreatic. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. More tests, CT scans, biopsies. Each appointment brought worse news. Stage 3 pancreatic adenocarcinoma. Aggressive, advanced. "How long?" Robert asked Dr. Chen directly. "With treatment, we're looking at 6 to 12 months. Without it, perhaps 3. I felt the ground shift beneath me. All our careful rebuilding, our tentative steps toward reconciliation, none of it mattered now. Robert chose aggressive treatment. Chemotherapy that left him nauseated and weak. Radiation that burned his skin. I moved him back into our bedroom, back into our bed, because suddenly the guest room felt like a cruel distance we couldn't afford. Emma became irrelevant overnight. Her betrayal, her lies, the apartment listings, all of it shrank to insignificance against the reality of Robert's mortality. She sent flowers once, which I threw away without mentioning to Robert. The past had no power here. "I'm scared, Sarah," he whispered one night after a particularly brutal chemo session. His head was bald now, his body a shadow of what it had been. "I know. I'm scared too. I wasted so much time, so much of our time." I smoothed his forehead, feeling the familiar geography of his face beneath my palm. "We have now. That's what matters. Do you forgive me? Really forgive me?" I thought about it honestly. The rage that had sustained me through the divorce proceedings had transformed into something else. A deep sadness for time lost, but also gratitude for what remained. "Yes, I forgive you. I love you, Sarah. I never stopped loving you. I know I love you too." The next months were a masterclass in presence. We talked more in those final weeks than we had in years. Robert told me about his childhood fears, his dreams for retirement we'd never have. I shared my business aspirations, my secret poetry writing, parts of myself I'd kept hidden. Rachel visited often, bringing homemade soup and sitting with us in comfortable silence. "You're both so brave," she said one afternoon while Robert napped. "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Sarah. It's loving someone through the fear." Robert died on a Tuesday morning in early spring. The hospice bed in our living room faced the window, where morning light streamed through the oak tree we'd planted on our 5th anniversary. His breathing had been labored for days, but that morning it simply stopped. I held his hand as he left, whispering all the things I should have said years ago. The funeral was small. Colleagues from his firm, a few neighbors, Rachel holding me as I sobbed into her shoulder. Emma didn't come, which was a mercy I hadn't expected to need. Cleaning out his things weeks later, I found a letter addressed to me in his nightstand drawer. His handwriting was shaky from the medication, but the words were clear. "Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're facing the future alone again. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused, but I'm not sorry for the way we loved each other at the end. You showed me what real love looks like, not the desperate passion I confused with love, but the steady, daily choice to care for someone even when they've hurt you. You are the strongest, most graceful woman I've ever known. Live fully, love again if you can. You deserve all the happiness I failed to give you. Thank you for coming back to me when I needed you most. Thank you for letting me come home." I sat on our bedroom floor, surrounded by his clothes and books, and the detritus of a life cut short, and finally understood what Dr. Martinez had been trying to tell us in counseling. Love isn't a feeling, it's a choice. I chose to love Robert through his betrayal, through his illness, through his death. And in that choosing, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. Months later, I still sleep on my side of the bed. I still make coffee for two some mornings before remembering. But I've also started dating again, carefully, hopefully. Because Robert was right about one thing: I deserve to be loved well. The affair that nearly destroyed us became, in the end, the catalyst for the deepest love we'd ever shared. Sometimes, the most beautiful endings come disguised as the worst beginnings. That's my confession. That's my story. That love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about forgiveness, presence, and the courage to choose each other again and again until there are no more choices left to make.